this is Michelle Kane with Michelle Kane Photography and Actions. On this video tutorial, we're going to take a look at editing a newborn image, cleaning up the skin, fixing the skin tones, and just giving kind of an overall lighter, hazy look to the picture. And this is where we're starting on this natural light picture, and this is where we're going to end up. So definitely changing the tones, lightening up the skin, removing that pink magenta cast that was on the skin, and just giving it kind of a natural hazy feel. Going over to the straight out of camera photo, the first thing I want to take a look at is lightening up the image. It's really dark, but a darker image allows us to get more detail in the picture. So going into the Heart and Soul set, I'm going to lighten everything up using light all over. And this image definitely benefits from some brightness, but I'm going to lower the 65% opacity down to about 45%. So now it's a little bit brighter than it was. Second thing is I want to get some of that pink magenta out of the skin. I don't want to remove it all because babies need to have some warmth to the skin, but it's just a little too magenta, and the picture overall is very cool. So I'm going to play an action called Anti-Lobster Skin. There's a CS2 version which doesn't brighten as it removes the magenta tones. The CS3 version will brighten and remove magenta, and the CS2 will not brighten. And I don't want to brighten anymore, so I'm going to go with the CS2 version and hit play. And it's going to tell me to use my white brush to brush this in, so I'm going to hit B for brush. I've got my opacity at about 30% opacity, and using the layer mask, I'm going to begin to paint this in. And I'm going to amp up that brush to 50. Okay. Another action that you can try for baby skin would also be the anti-fake and bake. And you might do both of those in conjunction with one another, the anti-lobster and anti-fake and bake. And I'm going to go ahead and play the fake and bake as well. And same thing with the brush. I'm just going to come in here. Actually, I'm going to get like a 20% opacity brush, something really low and light, so I can slowly start to bring those effects in. So the fake and bake is like when somebody's too orangey red, but we can get some of these magenta tones out as well. So I'm basically concentrating on getting over on the side of the face that's got a lot of that magenta, and leaving this side over here that doesn't have a lot of the magenta alone. So now that I've got those couple of things done, the picture overall is still very blue in tone. So we want to warm things up a little bit. I'm going to play Turn Up the Heat, and that's in the Heart and Soul set as well. And the default on that is 50% opacity when it plays, and I think I'll just keep it right there. So from what we've done so far, that's where we began, and this is where we're at, just fixing the overall luminosity of the picture and the tones, temperatures of the picture. Next, I'm going to move on to cleaning up the skin a little bit, and this can be kind of a timely thing to do. So I want to come back to my background layer, and I want to duplicate it, and I just clicked Control or Command J to do that. Now I've got a copy of this background layer, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit on the skin. And using the clone stamp tool, which is the S key on the keyboard, I like to use the clone stamp tool initially on the luminosity setting, the blending mode there. And we're going to go with about 30% opacity for this clone stamp tool. And this is to just clone out some of these rougher spots on the skin, some spots that either have these little white bumps or little spots of redness here and there. And by using the luminosity blending mode, it doesn't take into consideration the colors that you're clone stamping, just the tones, which I think is a little bit nicer than using the normal blending mode. So once I have a little bit of that, if I accidentally grab some of that blanket, I need to undo it. The key also with clone stamping is to continuously sample. So every time I sample, I'm using the Alt or Option key to hold down, and I get that little hairline there, and it just is sampling from this area and then painting over here, sampling from this area and painting over here. And you want to resample a lot, otherwise you're not going to have very smooth painting in there. Alright, so I could go on and on and on with this forever, and I'm probably not being as careful as I normally would just for the sake of time. If I go too far with something, I want to make sure I get it out of there. And then these bumps right up in here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change my blending mode for these bumps to darken. And now it's going to pick out the light areas and it's going to darken them. So I'm going to sample up here and just kind of come down into these white spots. I'm going to leave some of those because I don't necessarily want every ounce of his newborn sweetness and just the way babies look to be gone. Come over here and get this little bump out. You have to sample a couple times, that's fine. I'm going to switch my blending mode on the clone stamp tool now to lighten, and because there's so much darkness right up in here in this eye, I want to lighten this area up. So again, using the clone stamp tool, I will sample from a lighter spot, and I'm just going to go over these bumps, these red discolorations here. So sample, click, click, sample, click, click. That's kind of how it goes when I'm using the clone stamp tool here. I'm going to go back up to the luminosity blending mode and just smooth this out just a tiny bit more. We'll also be playing flawless face here in a little bit, which will help to smooth things even more, but I like the clone stamp tool for leaving a lot of detail in the skin and really getting just specific spots in the photo. Okay, so once that has happened, I'm going to click this layer off so we can see the skin before and the skin now. And I'm going to come back up here in my layers palette to the very top, the last thing that we had done for actions, which was turn up the heat. And the next action I want to run to just kind of tone and cream out the skin and the overall look of the picture is going to be Euphoria. And that is in the Creative Heart set in the Delicate section. I'll hit play. And once that runs, I'm going to drop down this opacity from 100 to about, well, this is where you can use your judgment, whatever looks good to you. I'm going to drop it down to maybe about 52%. I'll raise that up a little bit. Of course, you can open up these layers in Euphoria, click the eyeballs of each layer on and off to see what they do, you know, adjust them as you need. You don't always have to just keep the action just as it runs. You know, get in there and tweak the layers as you need them. So Euphoria brightened everything up, but one of the things I like to keep in my images is a darker eyelash line, sometimes nostrils and sometimes mouth, and maybe even the clothes. So since Euphoria has this built-in layer mask, I'm going to go ahead and grab a black brush, B for brush, and it's already set to black, and maybe like a 30% opacity brush. And I'm going to come in here and take some of the Euphoria off just to have a little bit of this blue showing on the hat and the wrap. And then I'm going to zoom in and get a really teeny tiny brush, and I'll amp up that brush opacity to about 50%, and I'll just brush. And what this is doing is removing that brightening effect of Euphoria and taking us to where the picture looked before I played Euphoria. So this is just removing that into these areas that we want to darken up a little bit. I think I'll leave the nostrils alone, and I don't like that on the lips that I just did, so I'll just Command or Control Z to undo that. So now I've darkened just a few little areas of the picture. If I want to go back in and tweak Euphoria, maybe say, you know what, I want that a little brighter. Maybe we'll amp that up to 57%. We could do that. So the next thing is I don't love the color of this blanket here. It's okay, but it's so close in tone to the skin tone that it just throws things off a little bit for me. So we could tone that in a couple of different ways. I like to go into the actual tones in the Creative Heart set and pick something out such as Sweet Maple. Maybe we'll make it a little bit richer and darker. So I'm going to play Sweet Maple, and it's helped to make that blanket a lot darker, but of course looks terrible on the baby. So again, using this white layer mask and a black brush, I've already got it set to about 30%. I'm just going to take Sweet Maple off of the baby, and this is just, again, for the blanket, just to give that blanket some oomph. And just because I have my brush set at 30% opacity doesn't mean that that's all that's getting brushed off here. I just like lower opacity brushes when I'm brushing so that I can build up my brush strokes. And so even though it's set to 30 doesn't mean that I don't eventually have 100% of this Sweet Maple taken off the baby. So I just extended that a little bit past the baby here. You can see as I show the quick mask that I've masked a little bit past the baby just to blend that out a little bit. And I just hit the backslash key on my keyboard to get that to show up. So I'm going to click Sweet Maple off, see if I like it for the blanket, and I'm going to drop the opacity of the layer down just a touch. The last thing I wanted to do is just some Flawless Face. And we're going to smooth out the blanket just a little bit more. I already worked on the skin earlier, but this is just going to be that extra little finishing touch of softening things up a little bit, blurring out the background just a little bit more, giving it just a little bit more of a softer, hazy kind of feel. And this will take just a second to run. Anything that's got some blur in it takes a little bit longer to run. And once it does run, I'm going to grab a brush, a white brush, again about 20 to 30% opacity. And as I mask, you'll see it's over here on the layer mask where I'm brushing is putting this Flawless Face into the picture. And I'll zoom in and get his skin just a little bit, especially around the nose. Not around the nostril, but just the top of the nose where it was all bumpy. Smooth it just maybe down here. And this is subtle and probably something that you won't see very easily on the screen on this video. But as you use Flawless Face, you'll be able to see how it's working out. The very last thing I want to do is just bring a little bit of darkness back into the blue of the hat and the wrap. And I could even use what I'm about to do to enhance these eyelash lines just a little bit. I'm going to play an action called Merge It, and it's in the miscellaneous tools. And what that's going to do is it says it gives you a composite of all of the layers into one new pixel layer that you can work on. So I'm going to do that, and it's going to take all these layers in the layers palette that we've already worked on and make a new pixel layer. And from there I want to get the history brush, and the history brush is set to the original straight out of camera image, so that's good. And using my history brush, which is Y on the keyboard, I've got my brush opacity about 20%, and I can come in here and I am painting on how the picture looked when we first brought it in. So I can darken up his eyelashes. I can lower that brush opacity, that was too dark, to about 10%, and brush on just a little bit. I'm dropping that down to 5% on his eyebrows just to give them a little bit more definition. And the last thing I want to do is just brush it a little bit over the blanket, or the wrap I should say, and a little bit over the hat. And this is just bringing back more of that blue tone so that these things have more of that tone in them. That's it. That's all we need to do. We've gone from this very cool yet overly reddish purple baby to a baby that's nice and creamy and smooth and pretty. For more information on the Hardy Actions, please visit our website. We've got lots of tips, tricks, tutorials, inspiration from other photographers, blueprints, you name it. And feel free to leave a comment. Let us know what kind of tutorials you'd like to see next. Thanks for watching and have a great day.